All right, great. So this is what we're going to do. Sorry, I missed earlier that recording of the review, but going into it, we have here in code comments. Can you guys see this clearly? Yeah, right? The code. I'll just bring it back in temporarily. But remember, inside this code comment, what the collection select is going to be doing is building this sneaky select. And then for each of these at Baker's, it's going to build one of these option sort of drop downs for us. Cool. All right, so now what I want to talk about is the ability to use the next level for this. And so we have form for, and we have this f block, which we know is going to be like inside this form block. And we have these f.labels, f.text, and what they're doing is associating each one of these f blocks. It's making a label tag for this form, and that's what the f dot is calling this method. So we can even do it for the f dot collection select, which is next level. And if I'm doing the form dot collection select, what I'm really telling this collection select is for the form, for the muffin object, I'm going to do this collection select. So with the f dot, the first argument is going to be implied specifically for the muffin. Cool? And so again, without the f block, I have to pass in the object that I'm building the collection select for. With the f block, because the form for is for this muffin, specifically on the f block, if I do f dot collection select, because collection select, like we talked about, is just a helper method. It's building the HTML for us. And if it's going to be building the HTML on the form for the muffin, the first argument is going to be assumed to be the muffin object, whatever I pass in here. Yes?
Can we just go through the parameters of collection select one more time?
Very quickly.
Yeah.
Very quickly. Collection select, the first argument is going to be muffin. So it's going to interpolate what the high level key is for our strong params. And then the second argument is going to be this Baker ID. So it's going to put this in the nested params. So when we do the strong params and we're doing params.require muffin, we can permit those Baker ID params as a whitelist. And then at Baker's is the collection we're going to go through. So essentially at bakers.eachDo. And then it's going to take in the ID, which it's going to interpolate here, because that's the value we want on the params to come across. And then we have name, which is a method that's going to be called on the object. So what the text to display on the screen is. And then finally, this prompt true just gives us that extra option that says please select. Awesome. So moving on for this, what I want to cover today, now that we have this form working, I want to actually build out those strong params. I want it to go all the way. I want to create objects. And as I alluded to right at the tail end of this morning's lecture, is should we be able to create bakers and muffins with like wrong or incorrect data? No, right? The idea, yeah?
Sorry, really quick.
Please.
Are strong params always a private method?
Strong params should always be a private method.
But there could be other private methods that are not necessarily the strong params. Square, rectangle thing?
Square, rectangle, yes. Okay, I'm going to leave that analogy alone for the rest of you. But yes, when we are inside the muffins controller, once we hit private, anything right past private will be private. So it's not exclusive to strong params. However, strong params should be a private method. So it will fall under this amongst a lot of other things.
Thanks.
Yeah. All right, so let's finish this out. This is where we left off on routes, right? We created this new, create, and index. So because we have this, we have new and create. What else do we have in here? Besides new and create, what else do we have in here? Help me out. Here, you know? Tim's watching. So yeah, so we have this index, right? As I've talked about, we shouldn't sort of like leave these exposed routes open. So naturally, what we should do then is I'm going to make the index method. Little lazy action, whoop, right? And of course, the two things that are super important is going to be what do we need from the model, and then what will the response be from this controller action. We already know that it's going to implicitly render the name of the method. So we're looking for a file called index here. But we can customize that if we wanted to, right? If I put render, I can put like custom file in here. It should be no problem. All right, so what do we need from the model for our index view? Yeah, all of them, right? So here we're going to do muffins equals to, that bit me in the butt. Tim, you missed it earlier.
No.
Muffins was bad. Muffin.all. All right, now that we have all of the muffins, we now have accessible inside that index page. So following along this whole MVC architecture, we're inside views, specifically inside muffins folder, and we're looking for a file called .erb. Right? So I'm just gonna.
Would you want to do index.html.erb or does it matter?
It does matter, and we are moving away from the index.html.erb convention. If I wanted to do that, I would have to put index.html because it's automatically going to add the ERB extension.
Cool.
All right, so I'm going to not do that. And we saw that in Sinatra actually. And again, Sinatra was sort of built by a student to kind of model how the Rails generators work, which was pretty money. And so let's go into index. We have all the muffins. Do I have access to all the muffins based on my controller here? Yeah, so let me do that. At muffins, right? Dot each do, bloop, bloop, right? Each one of these is going to be a muffin. And then we can end it, but oh my God. This looking like a Ruby, right? Do we want to show the dot each?
No.
No, so let's get rid of it. Because what will it show? What does dot each return?
The original array.
The original array, right? Remember what each of these things do. You like that?
If you show the end, will it also print the each like the original array?
No, remember it's going to be depending on what line you put it on.
Yeah, I know, but for if you only show the line end, does the end doesn't return anything?
End does not return anything, no. It will just simply display the word end. All right, so for each of these muffins, we have particular attributes. Does anyone remember what they are? Or we can look at what file? Oh, Flavor, of course. Embarrassing. And this also, looking like a Ruby. This is the one I actually want to display. I'm going to have that equal sign. So knowing what we know, I've built out this index and I've built out this view. How can I actually see it now on the screen?
On the server.
I should run the server, absolutely. Bloop, bloop, bloop. Server's done. And now the server is up. How can I actually go to this controller action? What would point to this controller action? Slash muffins, right? Why would it be slash muffins? Remember, I can hit Command T for that fuzzy search. I'm inside my routes. Why do I have slash muffins here? Right, because I used resources and I specified the index. Remember, that's going to build me under the hood a get to slash muffins, the RESTful route, and that's automatically going to point to the controller of muffins, specifically the method of index. Great. It's also going to write for me the helper, which is essentially just a variable that's going to point to this, and it's going to be muffins. Is it going to be muffins path? Muffins oath?
No.
What happens to this?
Muffins path.
Muffins path, right? It automatically appends at the end that underscore path.
The time it would be you do muffins path would be inside of the controller, right?
Whenever I reference the variable, I will type out underscore path. But if I'm building the helper, I do not. Yep, good question. So if I want to do this, right, I need to get to slash muffins, and that's going to point to the muffins controller. So if I do localhost 3000 slash muffins, boom, lemon. So we're kind of running into this problem where if I created two muffins with the same flavor, that's not really like a good user experience, right? I shouldn't make any more muffins that are named lemon because for whatever reason, I'm a very weird bakery, and I only want to make one of each, which is obviously cost efficient, obviously. Yeah. So how can we actually do that? How can we prevent data from going into our database that isn't what we want it to be? What was that key word that I described earlier? I want to make sure that it is good, it is valid data before I save it to my database. What? Right, it's the validation. So without even sort of looking into anything else, once I hear certain keywords, it's really good to dive into and figure out what that means. So I'm just going to put Rails, because that's the framework I'm on, and I'm going to put Rails validations and just see kind of what comes up. You can see how much prep I've done because I've already clicked this link. But if we actually go into it and we check out the validations, why do we want to even use validations? This is actually a very good read, but the idea is that generally speaking, can you trust your users to use your app perfectly as you intend and expect?
No, that's too.
Right? They just need a little help, a little guidance, right? Also, sometimes it's just out of ignorance. What I mean by that is, let's just take a popular website like Twitter, for example, and I want there to be Evans Wang. Now, actually that's a terrible example. I want it to be John Smith, right? If I wanted to sign up to be John Smith in the Twitter database, should I be able to create it if there's a John Smith that already exists? No, that'd be very confusing, right? If I @ John Smith and there's two of them, who am I trying to tweet at? Right? So we need validations, and it's really important. So we can catch those validations before they get saved to the database, and that is known as server-side validations. So server-side validations catch it right before it saves to the database on the server side. I'll let you take 2 seconds for notes, I see that. And so that begs the question, if there are server-side validations, are there, what is that other side? Client, right? Are there client-side validations? Well, probably, right? So today we're just going to focus on server-side, but there are client-side validations, and I think that it'd be very, very cool to kind of look into. And I will show you a little bit of that toward the end of the lecture. Cool? So when it comes to server-side validations, we can do it on the server, on the back end, and we could choose to do it when, just thinking through that MVC, right? What touches the database? Where do we want to put that validation? In the model, right? We could put, and so that's kind of the question, right? Ooh, model, that's kind of what interacts with the database, but also the controller, because it interacts with the model, right? The controller is where the params come in. So the correct answer is both, because it makes sense, right? The model deals with the database directly, and the controller receives the data from the params and is that go-between. So it pulls it from what the user sends over, and it has to kind of interact with the database in a bit. So it's going to be both. Let's actually write some. So let's take a look at validations overview. If you're looking at it, you have something called valid. Okay, that's useful. Something called error.details. Okay, that's useful. Validation helpers. Let's kind of like click through this, right? As I'm reading through the docs, I'm trying to read more about validations. I'm clicking through, and I'm like, all right, cool. I'm reading confirmation true. Interesting. Looks like you can confirm whether or not someone got an email. Again, if you're using that action mailer library, you can kind of use something like this for the future. Exclusion, format, inclusion, and length. Looks like you can determine how long something can be, but also something called numericality. Let's actually just pick one and test it. I think that as developers, it could be very easy to read into all this, feel like you're overwhelmed, but pick something that you feel like, okay, I understand at least the length portion. Let me try running that validation. And so it looks like under class person, it pulls from application record. So this would be controller or model? The model, right? Because it doesn't say person controller. So inside the model, I'm going to put something called validates. And what do you think these possibly are then? Should be the attributes, right? Based on what you have inside your database. So we have like name, for example, but let's put something for us in ours, in the muffin controller, right? We're going to create new muffins. So inside the muffin model, right? The muffin, the model, we have belongs to baker, right? We also want to do validates, and then just following this sort of syntax, I have something called name, but I think muffin has a flavor. Is it flavor? Let's go to flavor down. Flavor. And then we can do something like length. And it looks like it takes in a hash as an argument. So we'll just rip this. Boom. Boom. Validates flavor length minimum 2. Without sort of spinning anything up, we can kind of test this because now that I have this validation, I want to prevent it from being saved to my database. Without actually going into the web, I can test this by going into the console. So let's go into the console, and let me clear all this out. And simply do muffin.new so I could see all the attributes. If I do muffin.new, does that attempt to save to the database? No. Create will attempt to save to the database, and that's when the validation will sort of kick in, right? So if I do muffin.new and I put in name, flavor, and I try something like, oh, okay, it kind of does it for me, right? Remember, new does not save to the database, so the validation, wow, that was aggressive. It doesn't like kick in and punch in, right? So let's actually try that muffin.create, and now let's try a flavor. If I have a one-letter flavor, like ooh, oh, right? Should that work based on my minimum 2 validation?
No.
Okay. I tried to do it, and then it said, hold up, wait a minute, roll back, right? Let's take a look. Let's go and actually look into this object. Do I have access to this object anymore, or is it sort of on the last line? Do I have any reference to it?
No, it doesn't save. Right?
No, because 1, I didn't save it to the database, and 2, I don't assign it to a variable, so I don't have access to it. I can't refer to it on this line. So I'm just going to put M for muffin, all right? And I'm going to put that same line. And so now, again, it's going to roll back. If I have the M, that's the reference. That should be the object I attempted to save. So let's take a look at what M is. This is the object I attempted to save. It's important that we look at that. If we read through the docs as we were kind of like perusing through, we'll get to literally right in the beginning something called valid or invalid, and then something called like error details. Like, okay. So let's try. Is M valid? With the question mark, what should this return?
No.
What? Yes, false, but more specifically, because of the question mark, it should return a Boolean. I don't know why I think that word so much. False, and that's correct, right? And so I see something called errors, so let me just call errors. That's like a wild guess because I could see that there's some sort of method called errors there, and I see, active bottle errors, right? And let's take a look. It's kind of messy in here, right? It's like, something like flavor is too short, minimum needs 2 characters, but also, what's this? Baker must, okay, interesting. Let's see if we can get some of those errors, but more clearly in their full messages form. Bloop. Ooh, spicy. So how many errors are there?
Those.
2. There's this belongs to error. Sorry, I didn't highlight that right. This belongs to error. And then the flavor is too short. Minimum is 2 characters. Wow, what a stellar error message. And so, bless up Lord Rails, right? The idea is that if you use something like length, then under the hood, it'll give you some error messages that are included with them. So we can do so many other ones, right? Like minimum, maximum, in or within. And so you can kind of look to see what the attributes are. Is the attribute length must be equal to the given value. When do you think something like this might be useful? Password, I think, is more like minimum, right? Like, hey, you should probably have 17 characters in your password, 3 special characters, 8 capital letters, and then you just get ridiculous. But when would you want an exact amount? Like when you're buying something and you're paying for it with a
Credit card.
right? How many numbers do you think are on a credit card?
16, 12.
Good guess.
Oh, length is, okay.
It's, hint, it's 16. Welcome to 2019. Yes. The idea is that if I'm trying to save a credit card to my account, I need at least minimum or maximum or exactly. So this is a use case for something like is, right? So how can I use the is? Because it's all about being able to read documentation and implement. Here I see the example of length minimum, and length maximum, and then I see something like is. So I can, if I wanted to, say that every muffin, for whatever reason, length is exactly 3. All right, you ever play those old arcade games? And then like you get the high score and it only lets you put in 3 characters at the end? Okay, where do you think that validation is coming from? You know what I'm saying? Maybe not from Rails because it was like 1980 when all these like arcade games came out, but that's sort of the idea and the logic that there's use cases for different types of validations, and here's how you can just kind of sub them in. So I'm just gonna leave minimum of 2. Ugh. What do you guys want to do for validations, right? What should the validations for a name be? Is it just the sort of amount, the length that's important? Well, let's leave the minimum, right? And then what else makes sense for validation for a flavor based on our wild, crazy bakery? Right? If I have lemon, can I make lemon again? No. One of each. What would that be in English? How would you describe that? If it was unique, well, let's just see if that validation exists. I'm gonna control F, like a good boy, and I'm just gonna put unique. Okay, if I could spell it right. Uniqueness, that might be the one. Let's check it out. Uniqueness true. Oh, bless up. Lord Rail strikes again. Let's try. Validates, ooh, flavor, okay. And then I need this uniqueness true. So let's try it. Good question?
Yeah, do you have to create a new line for every validation, or can you chain them for one?
You can chain them, but we'll get into that. All right, so I have to exit out of here because remember, in this session, that new code didn't take. So I'm gonna get out of here. I'm gonna go right back into my console, and now I'm gonna check my muffin.all, plus up to active record, and I see that I have a lemon flavor.
Another one.
So if I notice how, that's actually a good point. Notice how I added that validation afterwards. Did it recursively go through my database and fix everything? No, so validations are important as to like when they're in, and specifically, we can take a look at when they get added, and certain things, we can take a look at their migration. We can look at their GitHub history to see when those validations got added. And then that way we know after this point, based on the GitHub history, your commit messages, when the validation got added. And then we can look at database entries that were created before then. And that way we know, like, hey, those are probably the ones where maybe duplicates were allowed.
And that would be when the timestamps would be very useful for active record.
Now you're getting it. Now you can use timestamps. You could sort backwards from a certain point on, right? And that's kind of like using the power of Rails.
Go through and do like,
Exactly. So if I were to go into my flavor saver and I were to try to make lemon again, what do you think will happen? Will it pass all of my validations? No, but which one will it actually pass? The length, right? So if I go, let me just make another reference to it, right? MU for mu. And oh, look, rollback, okay. How can I check those error messages again? Dot errors, mu dot errors. And remember, it gives you back this sort of like big blob. Some of it is kind of unreadable, and I want to take a look at those whoops. Wouldn't it be cool if I had the umlaut here? Full messages. That looks right. Okay. Ooh, look at that. Baker must exist. Flavor has already been taken. Oh, man. These error messages, plus, plus. So let's actually try to create one properly. And I'll think of MU, and now I'm going to think of, we did poopy seed already, right? What other muffins are popular?
Poison berry. I mean, you can just do lime.
Lime?
It's
You already have one.
a citrus-themed bakery.
Tim, you ever have a lime muffin?
Why not?
Well, you know what? We're about to make one. Boom! Except we didn't. And all of a sudden you're like, what? It passes my validations. I have more than 2, and it's definitely unique because, I mean, lime.
I'm checking for the baker too, right?
Yes. Now let's take a look at what MU is again. MU is now that lime muffin. If we look at the errors, specifically their full messages, I see that the baker must exist. Where would that possibly come from if these 2 lines at a length and a uniqueness validation, where could the possible reason and explanation for where this baker must exist validation come from? The belongs to. So we can infer now that the belongs to actually creates for us a validation. Because when I make a muffin, the first thing I think about is if this muffin belongs to a baker, when I make it, I have to be like, okay, well, which baker? Now, there are certain use cases where if I want to make a muffin, but I don't want to explicitly assign who it is, I want sort of that foreign key to not be assigned yet. I want to make it optional. I wonder what that might be called. Whoa! Did I spell it right? Whoa! Whoa! Right? And so now with that, thank you. I was worried I spelled it wrong. What this says is that I can actually make a muffin, but it doesn't have to belong to a baker yet. And so there's a lot of parameters and options that you could do for validations. And what we've talked about a lot is this built-in validations. But what if I'm creating a particular app, like a Power Arrangers app, and I'm like, you know what, for whatever reason, you have to have a very specific attribute, or you have to have certain things that we've come up with together that doesn't really make sense to like be automatically built in, right? Let's think through. For this muffin, what kind of validation do you think makes sense for this muffin? Besides uniqueness and length, what other attributes for muffin was there?
Baker.
Oh, it was just baker? Oh, dang. Well, now we have to add an attribute, right? I wonder how we could do that. That's right. What was that? A little louder for the recording.
You migrate.
Ooh. So should I use rake or should I hang out in Rails? So I'm going to Rails and I'm going to use it to db create a migration. If I put this in, it'll give me a powerful error message. Okay, that's not the one I was looking for. Oh, I think it's just create migration, right? If I forget the name of it, how can I see all of my Rails tasks? Oh, sorry, -t. That's bad. I see that it's actually Rails. Oh, I forget that it forgets. Oh, I forget that. You lose it. Yeah, I have to add a column to an existing migration. Yes. Rails wants you to stay in Rails land, so Rails G migration. Look at that. It tells you what to do. Bless up to Lord Rails and their error messages. It didn't even tell me it was an error. It just said, hey, maybe you're trying to do something. So helpful, so nice. So let's do it. Rails G migration, add SSL flag. That sounds intense. Cool. So let's actually create one. Ready? Rails G migration, add title body to post, and then a bunch of things in here. So this looks a little bit more about what I'm trying to do. So we are trying to Rails generate migration, add what to what? Right, we want to add an attribute to muffin. So what attribute of a muffin makes sense? Size?
Well, now you're making me think about something.
Size is great. Not going to make any comments about it because everyone is sort of whatever muffin is your flavor. Add size to muffin. So I'm going to just follow along their convention in terms of every word being camel case. Cool. And what we want to do is we want to add a size, and that is going to be, do you want that string or we want that number? Integer? Like a size 1 to 10? I was just going to go like, small, medium, large, or you could have like crackhead, like, you guys have been to, what is that? Cold Stone Creamery? Where it's like, oh, I like it, love it, and it's like, gotta have it. You're like, whoa, crazy. So, integer? Or string?
Based on certain
A size 2 muffin? You know what? Fine. Let's go integer because it's hilarious.
Muffin circumference.
Right. And so let's actually take a look at what this created for us. If we go into our files, specifically, oh, I'm kind of lazy. I'm just going to go into my db migrate folder. Look at this. Add size 2 muffin. Fuzzy searching. So powerful. Yeah, Command T. Remember I told you
No, I don't.
you were out on Friday. Did you watch the lecture recording? Oh, you're right. I've done this. Oh, all right. What I mean to say is Command T is great. It allows you to search through anything with the fuzzy search where you can kind of, you can kind of. Oh, man. So we are now in this in this migration. Wow, look at, oh my God, bless up to Lord Rails. Add a column muffins, size integer. Is this everything we need to migrate? Yeah, I think it's add a column to the muffins table, size, and it's integer. Wow, can we just straight up Rails DB migrate? Well, let's find out. Ooh. How can we go, what file am I going to look at to make sure that that took the way I wanted to? The schema? Ooh, wow, more Command T fuzzy searching. Wow. There it is. Amazing. Also, Tim, for some context, bakers have hairy arms, just so that we're all on the same page here. It is a Boolean. And it's always true. Which we now know how to validate. Oh my lord. You guys want to do that? You guys want to do that?
Bakers can't only have hair.
Can you just make a default true every time without having to do it?
You can set a default, and I would look up how to set default attributes, and you do it in the migration. Cool. So let's actually build up some fun validations, custom validation for sort of like this size, right? Let's go to the muffins class again, the muffin model. Do you know the Muffin Man? And what we want to do now is we want to actually build our own custom validations. So let's do that. Bloop, 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 bloop. All right, I promise we're going to do this custom validation, and then it'll go on a break, and then we'll actually see it in the web with the error messages. Cool. So let's do custom validations. If I want to do it, oh my goodness, does this offer custom valid Rails? You're gonna chant with me one day. I'm gonna get it to happen.
I'm already there.
So what we could
I'll
do
jump on anything.
is take a look at these custom methods. Okay, custom methods, and that is I can do validate, which is a little different from validates, so the S will matter. And validate means that you will do these two things. Expiration date cannot be in the past, and also discount cannot be greater than total value. But where are those coming from? They're custom methods that you build right away. So I will leave this for those that want to continue reading, and then I will go right into our muffin. So if I wanted a custom one, is it validates or validate? Okay, some of you have heavy accents. No S, right. So I want to validate, but what do I want to validate? So it's like some sort of custom method, which means that based purely on this powerful example, I could see that I need to make a custom validation. So before we can even name it, we've got to figure out what are we trying to validate. I added size in here, which can lead to a lot of things, insecurities. So size, right? I'm going to validate size. Size needs to be between what?
5 and 10.
Wow, so if you have a muffin less than 5, you just throw it away? Yeah. Sure,
Maybe
all
we
right.
donate them to like a home.
Oh, you're right, of course.
Yeah.
Obviously. What was I thinking? Let's do this. Let's do bigger than 5? Something like that?
Yeah.
Right? Okay.
You can make it really long like those, bigger than 5 and less than 10, but like that
Ooh, that would be too much, right? So let's use bigger than 5 as sort of the example, and let's see how they're actually calling it. It looks like this validation needs a conditional, which makes sense, right? Like, even in the English, if this muffin is less than 5, then just donate it. Ugh, I won't eat a 4 muffin, or even a 3. Get out of here. Out of here. Unless it's lime flavored, and then maybe. Which we can add as a custom validation, right? It's all that logic. So inside here, we can have a if statement, which makes sense, right? These validations must be some sort of conditional. So if the, how do we reference inside the class? Does this look like a class or an instance method? Are we guessing here? Instance method. Yeah, it's an instance method, right? Because I didn't actually have the self dot, which would indicate the class method. So here inside the instance method, I'm going to refer to the instance. So I'm in the scope of the instance. So I'm thinking through, right? The if ends, the def ends, right? If the particular muffin, right? But which one?
Self. This one.
The one that I'm calling the method on. So self dot, right? Size is an attribute of the muffin, right? If the self dot size is
Greater than.
less than 5, then we can simply put I'm better than that. I donated to more needy and lower standards folks, because I won't eat a muffin less than 5. No way. No way. Get out of here. All right. Who's 100% sure it's less than or greater than? In terms of this logic, should this be less than or greater than for the conditional to sort of to invoke to hit? Should be less than, or is it greater than? If you're not 100% sure, what should we do? We should test it out, right? What did you say?
It's an accident. I accidentally said chest.
Okay. I heard test
Sandwich
because I have selective hearing. So, okay, let's get into the Rails console. And let's go right into a tested muffin, test muffin, right, and nothing else. Muffin.create. We have to have a flavor that is larger than 2 and unique. Blueberry. Blueberry is good. And then we have a size. And size is an integer. So if we have 3, actually we should throw away a more disgusting muffin. But that's okay. Blueberry's delicious. Somebody will get it. And then we need to do the baker ID. Or do we? We don't. We don't, because it's optional. Look at that code. So readable. So if I'm just going to like kind of glaze over that and put it in, what should happen? Boop. Oh my goodness, it's saved, which means that I was in fact incorrect. And so I'm just going to switch this super fast, and then we will go over why. Let's find out. Let's find out. Let's find out. Boop, boop. Ooh, spicy. So it didn't work here, but let's find out why. If I test muffin, what am I looking for again? The errors. Oh, sorry. But what about the errors? I want to look at the full messages. So it says the flavor's already, oh yeah, embarrassing because it saved. Terrible. Oh man, blueberry 2. This also saved. Oh man. So this validation did not work. Oh my goodness. We messed something up. I messed something up.
No, we did.
Oh. Oh. Wow. First of all, we have to like make sure that that Boolean is correct. Next, we need to actually add some errors. Like if it goes wrong, we need to add those errors, right? Did you think that Rails is just going to give it to you? Like what would it say? How would it know what the custom error was? So we actually have to add some errors, and then we will reevaluate this logic. So I'm going to do this. Puts always is truthy. So for this, I'm going to add the validation to the size, the E size, okay, the size, and say something along the lines of no muffin for you, right? The muffin person from Seinfeld. All right, I think that
What's that soup?
I think it should be this way, right? It should be this way. This I think is correct. Let's try this one more time. All right, let's exit out of here. Let's get right back into the console, and let's make a new muffin that's something unique, like this, the unique muffin, and the size is going to be 3. It errors, but let's check to see why. So, no muffin for you, which makes sense, right? Huh? Oh, yeah, sorry. It's the attribute size, so it automatically capitalizes and embeds it here. And then it tells me the error. So
It should be this thing.
it tells you kind of like what the attribute it belongs to, and then the error message. Yeah? So just let's think through that logic, right? If it's bigger than 5. If it's less than 5, then I want to say no muffin for you. That's just, how readable is that? Bless up to Ruby. What a great, powerful language. And this is exactly how to do custom messages. So what we went over so far is how to use the built-in validations, where we reference them in the docs, kind of how we can change some of the parameters of them, how to add multiple ones. And then we talked about the custom validations, right? How we can use validate instead of validates, right? That S is going to be really important. Then we just pass in the method, and we have to create that method, making sure the logic is good, how we can test it iteratively, and then read those error messages. That's all we did so far. Are there questions on the difference between the built-in or the custom one that we built? Do you feel comfortable building your own custom methods? Quick thumbs up, kind of like, gladiator style, or like, nah, I definitely can't do it. Okay, with that, let's take a quick commercial break, and we'll be right back after a message from our sponsors, and then which we will, I realize now that joke kind of like laid flat, which we will actually build it in the browser, and we'll actually show those error messages on the screen. Cool? All right, let's take a quick break. Let's go. So remember we built validate and validate the custom method, and now we actually want to see all of this in action. The first thing we were thinking about is like on this new, if I put in flavor and then I put in like just create, what should happen? What does this form go to when I hit submit? What controller action should this hit? Index, new, show, create, update. You say yeah? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it hits create, right? So let's take a look at that Muffins controller. Specifically at the create, I've dropped a by bug, but I'm going to get rid of it. And what I want to do is I want to create this, right? So if we remember, we can take a muffin.create, and then we can pass in all of the attributes. In here, I'm just going to leave this blank for a second. If you remember those strong params, right? How did we build those strong params? What actually comes through? Do you guys want to see it step by step, or who feels like they're comfortable with strong params that we can build it now? Step by step it is. All right. Step by step. So if I hit flavor, I'm going to just refresh the code to make sure it's good. I'm going to hit flavor, and I'm going to make a new muffin, and I'm going to call it beef. Oh, obviously for Steven. Steven Balasta. He what was I even thinking? How did I stutter on that? Beef, and it was Simon. It was Simon. Well, you just came first, right? I go through array iterations. I dot each that. Great. So Simon is going to make some beef muffins.
Yum.
If I go in again, of course, I hit that. Whoops, I hit that by bug. So let's take a look at the params. Because of the way collection select built that nested hash, we can actually take a look to see. We have muffin. Actually, let me do this. We have muffin with two very important keys, and that is the flavor and the baker ID. I also realized that we added a migration, so we added a feature set, And we have to double check, did we create the size attribute? No. So let's make one. Inside the form for, we need to add a label, obviously. And that's going to be doop for here. And that's going to be the size. And we are going to take in the size. So all I did was add in another one. I think it's number field. Cool. So let's actually continue out of here. And let's go back to C. Now I have a size in here, right? So I'm going to make a beef one. Size. Oh, let's go 11. Let's just might as well, right? Beef. All right, so Simon's going to make this. Hit create. I'm going to check my params. See that? All right, I'm going to check my params. And I have inside the params hash, there's that top level key of muffin that points to the 3 attributes that I want. Flavor beef, size 11, baker with that ID of 2. Bless up to collection select. If I do params.require, right, which we went over with Steven, and we did the muffin key, it gives me everything inside the muffin hash, right? I can then choose to whitelist the individual properties, and I can permit the flavor, the size, and the baker ID. It's going to say permitted true. So with this specific code, I can in fact go back to my code, bloop, and I can create a brand new muffin with that code. That's going to permit those attributes. Now, we also know, right, the strong params, right? So a little bit of this. Ooh, strong params, obviously, got to keep it spicy. Little strong params action, and that is def. And we can name this. And we're just going to call these the muffin params. So a little muffin params action. And all that is going to, all that's going to do is that code for us. So with that abstraction, we can now invoke the method muffin params. And that's going to call exactly the same as the params I require permit, permitting those specific 3 attributes. Yeah? I'm just going to wait for the couple people taking notes on it. You got a question? Or that was like a thumbs up. Love that. All right. So remember, in terms of the validations, do we want to create a muffin every single time?
Yeah.
If it's valid, yes, bless up, right? So I'm going to get rid of this by bug, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to check to see if muffin.create, it's going to attempt to create one, right? If muffin.create, I don't know, .valid, if this is valid, well, then what do I want to do? This will attempt to create. This will attempt to actually save in the database. So I don't really need to do anything if this is valid. It'll run the code.create in the same line. Very sexy. If it does create, well then maybe I want to show them the index page and just be like, great, why don't you take a look at the index so you could see the successful creation of your brand new muffin. So I can redirect, right, just like we did in Sinatra, but this time with Rails it's redirect to. Is it redirect to with Rails or Sinatra? Redirect to, I think.
I think redirect is a
Yeah, redirect to. Sorry, I was waiting for it to highlight. Bless up to the text editor. Redirect to, and I can go right to the index page, directly going to /muffins. But as we've learned, how can I replace this with one of my helpers? I can go to the muffins path, right? Who feels comfortable with the muffins path? Okay.
Oh, yeah, helper method.
Yeah, the helper method, right?
Yes.
With resources, it built that muffins path, specifically with the S, right? Because muffins path means the index. If I had muffin path, it would be what page? It would be the show page. But which one? I would have to then tell it which one to go to, right? But here, let's just keep it simple and go to the muffins path straight to the index. Now, what happens if, I don't know, it doesn't work? I need to throw an error message, right? So here in the muffins path, right, what can I do? Do I have access to this right here in the same way that I had access to it earlier?
Yeah.
Well, what reference do I have to it? Can I do mu.errors? Ooh, I didn't actually have a reference to it. So let's do this. Let's take this code, bloop, bloop, and let's do this. At muffin. Ooh, okay. Is this creation? Now, if the at muffin is valid, I redirect. Else, right? Do I have a reference to it now that I've created this variable? Okay. Muffin.errors. And this gives me what? Oh, you're right. I don't need that anymore. Thank you. If, right, it's not valid, it hits this else. I'm looking at the errors, but specifically, what am I looking about the errors? Right, the full messages, which returns that array to me. Returns that array of messages. So, what I want to do now is I want to display those errors in the page, right? I want to display those errors in the page. How can I create something that I can pass into the view? That's what I'm trying to do, right? I need this array to be able to be passed into the view. How can I create something that allows it to be passed into the view? I can make an error page in the views, but what do I need here specifically? What kind of specific variable gives me that magic to pass into the view? Another instance variable, right? So I have something like at errors equals to this array of error messages, right? But what view do I want to pass it to? Do I make a brand new view? Or what's a good user experience you've seen before on any particular website? I'm trying to sign up for something, and it's like, sorry, dog, John Smith at AOL.com is already taken. What view page am I looking at? A separate error page? I'm looking at the form again, right? So what I really need to do is basically see the form again. So what I'm going to do is I have to go back to new, right? So my choice here is what? How do we go back to new? I just redirect to new, right? So let me do that. Boop, 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 boop. Redirect to new. Should I do the new, new muffin path? Oh wow, that was sharp. And yes, right? Remember, that's the helper the resource is building for us. So I'm going to redirect to new muffin path. Let's take a look at routes. Ooh. Yeah, the new does it for us. I know, sick. Bless up to Lord Rails. So back in the muffins control, I'm going to redirect to muffins path.
I have a question. What is the difference between render and redirect to?
I'm going to get to that right now. Thank you for that. So in the redirect to, right, it goes to new muffin path, which is actually another get request to /muffin/new. Let's take a look at that happen inside this whole thing. So I'm going to save it because I've definitely made that mistake before. I'm going to refresh this muffins new path. I'm going to do something that's a little tricky, and that is I'm going to try to pull the code here, and I'm also going to try to pull the terminal in this bottom right corner here. I'm going to do that here in a second. All right, so check it out. I'm going to clear this, and I'm going to make a refresh right here. So let's take a look. When I first hit this page, I made a get request to muffins new, right? You can even see it right here, a get to muffins new. And then what it did was it rendered muffins new.erb. Cool. Now, if I actually do the flavor and I put nothing, like K, right, which we know will fail the validations, it obviously less than 2. And the size, I'm going to put 1, also fails that validation. And then I'm going to put Simon. If I hit create muffin, let's take a look at the code. It's going to attempt to create. We know it's going to roll back. It's going to fail. It's going to fail this valid and hit this else. What we need now is at errors, redirect to the new muffin path. So if I hit create muffin, let's take a look. Cool. So look what happens. Remember, we were at the get earlier. I scrolled all the way up. It will post to /muffins, which makes sense because that's what forms do. Forms will post to the route that we specify. The RESTful route for a form 4 will post to /muffins and hits what controller action? a post to slash muffins? The create action. So in the create action, we have a post to muffins. It will attempt to save. It begins the transaction. But then the validations kind of happen. And then womp womp, rollback. And so because it fails, I say create a new @errors and then redirect to muffins path. So what do we see? 302, that status of redirect. Oh, and then it does a get to muffins new. So when I hit submit here and it fails, it hits the else and makes another request, right? What I want to see is actually the errors on the page. So I have access to them. Did I put them in the views?
No.
No, so let me do that. First I'm going to do this. And I know this looks like a Ruby, so I'm going to put @errors.each do. And for each of these error messages, and I'm going to put literally the error. Because they're strings, right? So there's an array of strings. So I'm just going to slap this p tag on here. Slap it on the DOM real quick. And there we go. What happens when I first refresh? On the first time it loads, what will @errors be? The first time I hit the page, I've never submitted the form ever. @errors should be not just nothing, but more specifically, nil. So what happens when I load this page? Oh my goodness, undefined method each for nil class.
Oh.
Wow.
So if errors.
That means that if @errors exists, I'm gonna indent this like a champion. If @errors, right? Remember, nil truthy, falsy. So this will never run if errors is nil. Ooh. So this technique is known as nil rapping. That means that, like, let's say you go to your page for the first time and something's always going to evaluate to nil. You have to kind of double check against that. So this is nil rapping. Cool. So now if I hit refresh, I know my @errors is empty. If I try to type in something, I hit save. I'm expecting some sort of error. Okay, undefined method, got it. Ugh. I have to put in something for size. So let me refresh, A and 1. Huh, that was weird. Let me try again. A and 2. Let's take a look at the console here. I hit Simon, create. It definitely worked, right? I had that post happen, it failed, and then I got that new get to new, but I don't see the errors. Well, let's think. It was another request. It was a new request. So if it was a brand new request, right, let's take a look at this code here. I'm in the new, right? It works. I hit submit, it does the post, and I hit the create. It fails the validations, and I get redirected. When I get redirected, and then I go into new again, what are @errors here? Nil, they're gone. There must be some way that I can pass data for another request. I have to like give it so that on the next request, it's still there. And so how we can do that is we can use something called the flash hash. Its sole purpose is to hold data for one extra request. So instead of this @errors, I'm going to use something else. And I'm going to put a bybug right here because I know that this is going to hit.
And the reason you use this flash hash is because a class variable would not work in this case.
In this case, it would not work. Yes, the Rails does things under the hood.
Okay.
It creates an instance of the controller. We can talk offline about it. But it's going to hit this else, right? So let me try it. Flavor A, size 1, create muffin. And I'm hitting this bybug now. Let's take a look at what the flash hash is. If I just type in flash, it's available to me globally. Right now, what I mean by that is I have access to it in my controller, and I also have access to it in my views out of the box with Rails. Rails, 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 Rails. It's just available to me. It builds this sort of like in the background for me because I might need something that can hold data for one extra request. So if I do that, it's just a regular hash. I could set a key of dolphin if I wanted to, and that could be like cool. So if I take a look at Flash, I see Flash is at a key of dolphin goes to cool. But I don't really want dolphin, do I? Inside here, if I want to save my data, do I want @errors or do I want this Flash holding my data for that one extra request?
Would you do flash.new?
No, Flash gets built for you
So it's not a class.
by Rails.
It is and it isn't. Cool, whatever.
It is, but that's not important right now, right? So I can do something like Flash hash at a key of, would dolphin make sense here? No, what do I want this key inside my Flash hash to be? Errors, right? That makes sense. It could be muffin errors, right? So errors, boop. And like I said, Flash is available to us globally. So if Flash is available to us globally, should it still be @errors? Or should it be Flash at a key of errors? Now let's find out, right? So I go back to new request, right? I have a flavor of A, and I have a size of 1. Nicole's gonna make this. If I hit create muffin, the Flash error should go through each of them. And now I should see the buy bug. I'm gonna continue that, and boom! My errors are on the page. Because Flash holds it for one extra request. That means that if I refresh and it's the new request, will this still be here?
Nope.
Wow. So remember, the redirect gives you a brand new request because the redirect is saying, hey, why don't you do another get to this new muffins path, which is muffin/new, all right? I love that smile, it means it clicked. So for the redirect, we also have something else that we've used pretty often, and that's that render. So why use render, why use redirect? Well, let's take a look. If I change the redirect to render, and I passed in, say, I don't know, remember render is a method, so I can either do new like this, or I can call render method and pass in that new ERB, right? So when it comes to render, let's take a look at what's actually happening. Let me get rid of the buy bug. I'm gonna do a refresh here. So look, check it out. What the? Did you see that? Okay. That was weird. All right, so I'm gonna hit refresh, and it's just gonna give me that get to new. I'm gonna fail the validations again. When I hit create muffin, let's see what happens. Interesting. Undefined map for nil class. That's weird, right? Let's take a look at what actually happened here. I did a get to muffins new, right? That was that first reload I showed you. When I submitted the form, it did post to muffins, which hits that create action, and then it fails the validation, so we know it hits the else. If it hits the else, it's gonna create this flash, and then it's gonna render new. Let's take a look. It fails the validation, and then it sort of comes here, and it does not do a 302, it does not redirect, it does not pass go, it does not collect $200, and all of a sudden, it says render here instead of redirect. Render just means I'm gonna throw you that file. That's the response it gives back. So let's take a look at the response. Inside of the else, what one variable do I have access to? Flash at a key of errors. I only have one variable available to me in the else block, yes? That means that when I render new, let's take a look at what new is. If I look at new, I see flash, which I have access to, and then I see, SpaghettiOs, I see this @muffin. Does @muffin exist inside this else block? It does, because I've attempted to create it and it did not save. So let's keep going.
Doesn't it create?
Does @bakers exist though? Remember, @muffin existed because I tried to save it and it didn't work. But @bakers doesn't exist inside this else block. So it gets all the way, it gets all the way to the f.collection select for bakers. And then it's like, yo, bakers doesn't exist. I don't know what to do. That's a nil. So I cannot map the nil class because remember what it's doing under the hood. I was wrong. It's not doing each. It's doing map. Sorry. It's iterating through and making those options for you. And so bakers breaks. So in this particular case, if I simply render, if I simply just give it to you, I have to think about the scope of my variables. And what I mean by that is new @muffins, @bakers good to go. But in the else, those variables don't exist. So render is just sending the response back. But if I did a redirect to new muffins path, it's going to do a new get request, which goes, hits the routes, hits the controller action of muffins controller, specifically at new. Those variables get reset, and then it renders new here.
So render just gives it file asset. Redirect will go to control first and then do.
So
Render, let me just get this so it's clear instead of like a million questions, right? Which I love the energy. Render will simply serve the file, right? And it will have the exact scope it's currently in. Redirect will do that new request. It will follow the controller action, and then whatever the controller action tells it to do, it will do that again. So there's a difference between render and redirect. All right, if we wanted to fix that, we can do something like recreating that instance variable of @bakers here equals to baker.all. And that should theoretically fix the problem.
So render doesn't make an HTTP request.
Correct. Render does not make a new request. It simply serves the file. Exactly in the same way that when I do index, it sets the instance variable and then just serves the file. We've seen it before. And so that's the main difference between render and redirect. Redirect will make a new request. If I did this, will bakers exist now? All right, so I want to do this, new. I want to do A1. I want to do Simon. Create muffin. What the? Oh, sorry, it's new muffin path. Embarrassing. Wow, bless up to Rails error messages.
Did you mean?
I sure did. So A1, cool, create. All of a sudden it's, boom, it's right there, it's good to go.
Wow.
So that's kind of the main difference there. So I have that redirect action or I have that render action. Let's take a look very closely as to what render will do versus the redirect. So I'm gonna do a request to muffins new. I'm gonna do A and I'm gonna do 1 again. I'll make it Nicole. Take a look at the URL on the render side of the house. If I create muffin, it looks like the errors came out, but where did it point to? /muffins. Why did it do that instead of re-giving me back that muffins new? It's because where does, and this is like all of it coming back into action now, where does the form submit to? A post to,
Index.
a post to /. So with the render, it's going to take the route from the form. But with the redirect, it will actually give you the correct path because you're making a new request to muffins new. So let's take a look at that one more time, /new.
Not based off.
All right. Why did this persist though? This one extra request.
Oh, this is the next one.
Because it's the next one I have flash. So this becomes a new problem. Let's separate all the problems and I'll talk them all out for you. So flavor A, size 1, create muffin. It gave me the muffins new because I did the redirect. If I'm doing a redirect, flash should be the move. Because I'm doing a new request and I want that to persist. If, however, and I'm going to keep them separate. If, however, I want the render action, do I need it to persist one extra request? Because does render give me a new request? No. So you have the option of flash with the redirect, or you have the instance variable. You have to reset all the variables on the page and then render. Those are your two choices, right? If you use the render, remember what it does to the route. It will go to where the form submits. In terms of a user experience, when I submit a form, do I want the route to change? Not really, because if I submit a form and I had a typo, right? Let's see what happens. Okay, that's, if I use add errors, I have to change these to add errors as well. But if I did that and then the URL changed to this, what happens when I hit refresh when my URL changes? It will just go to index. That will just be confusing to users. So, spelling it all out for you, okay? This right here will follow the form URL. This right here will follow the redirect URL. So with the redirect, you have the extra request. You need the flash to hold it. Without the redirect, with the render, if you have the instance method that passes it in, you also have to recreate everything that's on the page. So this right here is sort of an option for you, but you have to understand render redirect. So just by a quick show of hands, thumbs up, thumbs down, do you feel confident in your understanding of render versus redirect? Oh, wow. Oh, my God. Wow. 100%. Okay. 100% understand. So that's kind of really what I wanted to show you, how to get errors on the page. Who feels comfortable displaying errors on a page? Thank you. I'll pay you later. So that's really all I have today.